Alright, everybody, we are back. Okay, get Father back. Good afternoon. Alright, here we are. The evening's mid-session. Yay! You made it. I'm pleased to present our final three presenters, Ethan, Rosemary, and Corey. Each of these performer scholars has interrogated their acting processes throughout the year, and each through a different lens. Reading their work has been a real pleasure, and here's why. Ethan's methodical exploration showcases his persistent intent to grow as an actor, his boundless curiosity about the process, and his joy in doing so. Rosemary's piece also displays an abiding curiosity as she interrogates the question of her performances, of gender. I found it carefully crafted, often razor-sharp prose to reveal many acute and well-informed observations on gender. Finally, Corey's work on limiting beliefs puts the in insight, turning the spotlight of curiosity on his inner demons, demonstrating keen self-awareness and what I have found to be remarkable vulnerability for an academic endeavor. I am proud to present these performer scholars to you. Take it away, Ethan.
All right, hello all. I am Ethan Gunderson, and this is my presentation on my MFA thesis, You Here Now Solve, Discoveries Through the Three Pillars of Acting. Now, before I jump into what the three pillars of acting are and some of the things I learned by using them throughout my MFA year, I would like to briefly talk about pizza. I love pizza, and almost more so I love making pizza. And by judging the length of my beard in this photo, I think that particular pizza was made around the time when I played Motel. Now, I've made pizzas that I would say were pretty good. I've also made pizzas that were, in my opinion, as the youth say, mid. Even if people told me that they really liked them. Of course, I've also made pizzas that were downright inedible. Remarkably, one of my past roommates ate one of those horrendous pizzas, and he said he thought it was great. He was an idiot. Regardless, I have found that the only difference between what qualifies good pizza from bad pizza is a matter of taste. The point I'm trying to make through this roundabout pizza metaphor is that acting, good or bad, and how to act is simply a matter of taste. No one actor, teacher, director, or book will have the answer for how to become a great actor because everyone has a different taste for what great acting is. The work I've done this year with the three pillars of acting has helped me improve as an actor, and that's great. This presentation is by no means a sermon on what I believe to be the absolute gospel of acting, but rather I aim to share some insights I gained this year. And if that helps any of you as artists, fantastic. If not, great. In the words of Kelly McKinnon, I don't really care. Now, what are the three pillars of acting? What are they used for, and how did I first learn about them? The three pillars of acting are as follows. The first one, everything you say and do in a scene is about changing your scene from it. The second pillar, everything you say and do in a scene, no matter how grand or mundane, is a solution to the problem at hand. And the third pillar, everything you say and do is being thought of to say and do right now in the scene. Ideally, each pillar should be present in an actor's performance and can be used as a tool for self-evaluation, regardless of whether or not the performance was, again, to use that unproductive binary, good or bad. Intentionally, the pillars are, as an acting tool or diagnostic, are not concerned as much with the achievement of successful acting, but the maintenance of it. Unlike other art forms like painting or writing, acting, and especially theater acting, can only exist in the ephemeral. For me, the three pillars help me get out of my own way to let my characters exist in their own fleeting ephemerality, rather than my fraught anticipation and control. One thing that I love about the three pillars is that they do not negate or oppose other acting techniques or methodologies. but serve as the context those acting approaches can be better understood by. For example, when I receive a note from a director or acting coach that I may initially disagree with or not quite understand, rather than falling into the self-pitying death spiral of boo-hoo, I got a note, I must be a bad actor, I will run that note through the 3 pillars and see which one could help me the most incorporate it. Last summer, while in dress rehearsals for a play, I got the feedback from my director that my character needed to be more loose. I wasn't sure what to do with that, but instead of trying to do my best impersonation of a slinky, as mesmerizing as that would be, I went back to the 3 pillars. I know one of my acting habits is to anticipate my next line out of fear I will forget it or miss my cue. When I do this, I tend to hold my breath, tense up, and lose focus on my scene part. Having this self-awareness, I decided to try focusing on the 3rd pillar. Everything I say and do is being thought of to say and do right now. I resisted the urge to think ahead to my next line by A, breathing, and B, actively listening to my scene partners by tracking what new information their characters were telling me, and not worrying about what my next reaction was going to be. By getting out of my head, focusing on what was happening right now, I became more reactive, spontaneous, and, in regards to the director's note, more loose. I was introduced to the 3 pillars of acting by Sarah Topham and Michael Blackwood in our 2nd year acting class. The 3 pillars were essentially the basis of what we worked on all semester, and Sarah provided us with some tools to help us implement those pillars into our work, which I will come back to in a moment. If memory serves, I believe that Sarah and a colleague of hers came up with the 3 pillars of acting as a means to teach acting to middle schoolers. They asked themselves, if we could distill all our knowledge and experience as professional actors into just a few basic principles that even a child could understand, what would those principles be? As a result, they came up with the 3 pillars of acting. And because I myself am nothing more than a very big, hairy child, I am very grateful for the pillar's simplicity and straightforwardness. Now, just because the pillars are simple, it does not mean that they're easy to use. In fact, I really struggled in Sarah and Michael's class because they were so simple. As an artist and as a person, I like to do things well, and I really like to get things right on the first try. But the more I would try to get it right in class, the less progress I would make. I only started making progress with the 3 pillars when I discovered 2 things. I needed to be okay with failing because failing is the best way towards discovery, and that I had to stop thinking so much. Jump in and go for it, even if I'm not sure if I will do it right. Fail with my full chest and try again with joy. In her class, Sarah taught us an acting technique she developed for applying the 3 pillars that she called tasks. Now, because we are suckers for alliteration, many of us who were in that class like to call them topping tasks. Now, a topping task is a repeated word, phrase, or physical action inserted into the spoken play text that directs the actor's focus to one of the 3 pillars of acting. Topping tasks can be adjusted or invented to meet the actor's needs. For a task to be effective, it must be performed with commitment, not passivity, to its corresponding pillar. I will demonstrate some examples of topping tasks for each pillar with a line of text from our friend Dogberry. Remember that I am an ass. Just to be clear, these are just a handful of task exercises, and since taking your class, I've come up with several of my own that were instrumental to my acting work this past MFA year. I picked these 3 examples because I think they best distill the pillars down to their most basic forms. Okay, so if I wanted to work on applying the first pillar to this Dogberry line, I could use the task you. To do this, I simply say the word you, followed by the line. You, remember that I am an ass. This topic task is great if you're struggling to deliver a line to your scene partner. And I find this one great for handling clunky or difficult exposition in Shakespeare. One exercise for working on the 2nd pillar of acting is the I can solve this task. Similar to the you task, I would say out loud or in my head, I can solve this, then say the line. The line, the text, being the solution to the problem at hand, followed by the word solved. Now, you don't say solved until you feel that you genuinely solved the problem with the line of text. So say that the problem is that Matthias won't listen. What I can do is, I can solve this. Remember that I am an ass. Solved. For the third pillar, I included 2 examples because the third pillar deals not only with the time, but also the space the character is existing in. For the now task, I'm focusing on helping the character verbalize their thoughts in the moment that they speak them. Now, remember that I am an ass. The other third pillar task I want to be here is neat because it helps the actor be aware of where their character is choosing to be on stage. First I say, I want to be, and I don't say here until I'm certain that I want to be there. Whether that's somewhere else or where my character just was. And then I say my line of text. I want to be here. Remember that I am an ass. I like to use these particular talking tasks not only as exercises, but as a shorthand to help me figure out what I need to improve in my acting. Do I need to focus on you, or on here, or now, or on solve, or, which is always the case, all of the above? Great, so now that I've given you a whole crash course on the 3 pillars of acting and topic tasks, let me finally get to my thesis. I came to SMP because I wanted to learn how to become a professional actor. And I could not have even imagined 3 years ago how much I would have learned from our wonderful faculty and from my peers. And when I took Sarah's class and learned about the 3 pillars of acting, it completely flipped the script on how I understood acting to be. After her class, I found that not only was my acting improving, but I could sustain a consistent flow of creativity and inspiration. I didn't feel stuck anymore and worried about acting correctly. And the most profound change I experienced was that I became a far better collaborator because the 3 pillars helped me realize that I can't make acting happen in a vacuum. I need my fellow actors. I need my directors. I need my designers. My best work can only happen outside of myself. Because of this progress, I wanted to invest further in my understanding of and training with the 3 pillars. So for my MFA thesis project, I decided to use each show in our season to focus on a different pillar of acting, with the goal of determining whether or not this would be a productive way for me to approach acting as a profession. I determined what pillar I would focus on for each production based on specific challenges I predicted each show would present. For our education show, Heracles for young audiences, I knew that I wanted to create a character that our young audiences could connect with. So I predicted that by focusing on the 3rd pillar of acting, I could find a childlike spontaneity and wonder in who would become Gus. For our small-scale production of King Lear, I was most concerned with the clarity of the story, particularly across all 5 of my character tracks. So I anticipated that the 2nd pillar of acting would best help me shape and sharpen each of my characters' actions and objectives. For our Blackfriar show, Bartholomew Fair, I was curious how focusing on the 1st pillar of acting could help me find specificity in my character's relentless audience address. And by our 4th production, our Renaissance show, The Goblins, I had run out of pillars to work on, so I used that show to further test and apply the lessons I had learned in the previous 3 productions. So, in the last few minutes, let me talk in greater detail about my process for applying the 1st pillar of acting to my role of Justice and Overdue in our production of Bartholomew Fair. As a reminder, the 1st pillar of acting is that everything I say and do in a scene is about changing my scene partner. I had an interesting challenge as Overdue because his primary scene partner was, in fact, the audience. So if Overdue's scene partner was the audience, what was he trying to change here? After studying the script and considering Overdue's motivations as a character, I realized that a possible change that Overdue may want to affect on the audience would be for them to be on his side. Overdue is a character who pits himself against the world of the play as an executor of justice. But because he is in disguise for nearly the whole play, he has no one to be on his side. But who does Overdue allow to know his true identity? The audience. I approached Overdue's frequent asides and soliloquies with a desperation to change the audience in such a way that they will agree with him and see things as he sees them. Now that I had identified what I was trying to change, I used 2 talking tasks to help me focus on my scene partners, the audience. I used the task, Are You With Me?, which is one of my favorites, and I created a task of my own for Overdue, Are You Seeing This?, to use these tasks I would say them as I would practice my lines, and then I would think them to myself during rehearsals and performances. Whether or not I actually changed the audience to be on Orju's side was inconsequential. But in the effort to try and change my scene partners, Overdu's character came along. So, in conclusion, should I keep using 3 pillars as a professional actor? Yeah, I think it would be really stupid if I didn't. Because what being a professional actor means to me is that I only give the audience the very best work I'm capable of, every single time. And the 3 pillars of acting has provided a way for me to do that without fear of failure and creative sustainability. Thank you.
Very well done.
Thank you.
Congrats. Thanks, Vice Warden.
Listen, I am really just inspired by your performance. And as an interested party, I'm really interested in things you learn, advice you might have, on how you came up with the creative tasks that you worked with in your process. You have some really great one you didn't mention in your presentation, but you talked about it a times, was the I love you with weird.
Yeah.
Finding the ones that work with you.
Yeah, it kind of came, those ones came very much like top down. So like for King Lear, I was very focused on thinking through what are the problems that my character is solving. So there was a particular scene where Kent is leading Lear to the hovel, and it was fine, but we were really struggling to find specificity in the scene. And I just, I was finding Kent was becoming quite abrasive, and but then Lear would say the opposite. He wasn't listening. He would want to go. He was talking about other things. And I realized, okay, well, let me run through this. That's the problems I need to get. But what does he need from me to be able to listen to me? And so in that moment, I was like, well, what if I try all my lines before I say my line? I say, I love you to John as King Lear. And what that did was it shook up my perception of what Kent was trying to do, and the relationship and specificity of care that we've been striving for in our production flourished in that moment. So often, like those more creative ones come out of preparation work of thinking about the pillar in the context of play, given circumstances, all those things. Yeah.
Great, Corey, you took the question right out of my mouth. No, it's great. You talked tonight and also in your thesis about how the pillars help you perform sustainably.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what sustainability means to you and how does the pillars support that?
Yeah. So sustainability, I think, the way I think about it in terms of also like, can I do it over and over and over again? But not only can I do it over and over again, but can I keep it alive? Can I keep it fresh? Can I keep it accessible? Like we all know when we're watching an actor just go through the motions of performance, and it's kind of just dead. And so the sustainability is the nice thing is the work is never done, and every time I'm performing, particularly when the show is up, I can always be thinking about, okay, well that was a good run, but maybe I'm getting a little rusty on being more present, and so that I can go back to those task exercises, go back to the pillars, and see how I can, even if it's such a micro adjustment, I can incorporate that and think about that in my performance, even if it's the 10th run of the show. And that gives me something to work on, aside from just reciting my lines and just kind of reliably going through my track.
You've mentioned that certain parts of a phrase in a task could activate different pillars, like you activating working on another person. But you've also talked about how you felt like pillars could sort of activate each other. And I was wondering if you might have anything more to say about that.
Yeah, something that's interesting is like, yes, they are like ordered like 1, 2, 3, but you can work on it, like you work on them based not on the order that they are arbitrarily given, but what the needs are. And frustrated just giving up on it. It's like, well, maybe rather than focusing on this pillar, we tackle it from a different angle, and that will await something that will fix the scene or help move forward. Great. That's okay. Wonderful work. Thank you very much.
Rosemary.
I have to play a girl in games. I'm not a girl's fight out. Said no male actor, never. And by the time female actors are entering the professional sector from undergrad graduate programs, especially ones geared toward classical theater, they're well accustomed to being nerds. Playing a male character or two out of necessity is practically a rite of passage, as a mere 18% of Shakespeare's characters are women. And today's college theater programs tend to average somewhere between 66 and 83% female. While it's no mystery how female actors hit some of the male parts, the prevalence of practice doesn't mean you can't explore imaginative artistic visions in said context. Casting across gender asks unique interpretive positions of those responsible for making it, such as, should I change the gender of the character to match the actors? Should I have all the female actors casting their roles perform their characters masculinity or just certain ones? Or on the acting side, should I ask my director for their vision first, or just present my version of the character and see what happens? And then, of course, there are practitioners who can't hear the consistent questions such as these begging to be addressed in the nebulous gender group created by casting women as male characters and dump performance on stage without a second thought. Don't be like that. Having played predominantly male characters this year, I presented a practice-based guide for interacting with this inevitable situation in real life intelligently, so as to win the respect of your colleagues, directors, friends, and enemies. So take your power back in our yet male-dominated theater industry. I personally most enjoy when an actor of different gender intentionally performs a character as the character's scripted gender, so that's predominantly what I experimented with this year. An excessive volume in combination with the ridiculously high pitch from creating natural timbre accomplished this. Effectively intimidated the dull read probably watching to the previous and dog expression boldly. Continually creating dogberry and moments on stage, listening to facial reactions and nervous habits such as swaying, restricting my weight, scratching my nose, and scratching my head is also crucial to keeping his gender identity alive and realistic rather than static. My discoveries through ethological preference assertions in performative acts and gender constitution that human identities, which are necessarily gendered, are not made in a single moment of time, but rather made again and again. And that the gender concept is played out through my new tasks and everyday life, which bear similarities to performative acts in theatrical contexts. And yet they reach out that it's my new tasks again and again, as I did throughout the review, enabling me to effectively perform dogberry's peculiarly masculine, which was equal parts ludicrous, ignorant, and fiercely annoying. The most valuable tool I took away from 3.6 was visualization. One rehearsal director was Anna Taylor and Jess Slice, the exercise stepped into our characters after imagining them standing before us in detail. The specificity of this mental exercise forced me to engage with, enabled me to commit more fully to detail rather than generically made up coded choices, like Edward's cowboy or swagger and frat boy character. And frequent to respond to impulses more immediately from within Edward's skin. Another crucial aspect of my small-scale process was using textual evidence to inform meaning of different parts of the body. Drawing on the words other characters used to describe Edward, Prince Edward calls him mischievous and 5'5", and Margaret calls him wanted and 1'4". Finding his descriptive treatment of Lady Grey, I first experimented with bleeding from the pelvis, which manifested as something like a subpart that crosses for I also experimented with bleeding from the chest or heart due to Franklin's familial bonds, which I found I preferred as its subtlety opened me up posture-wise, suiting my director's vision for a more genuinely romantic encounter with Lady Grey, and helped me take up the space and envision the first parts on I originally experimented with bleeding from the heteronomous of the bloodhound concept. His insatiable appetite for revenge would propel him forward from the ground, spurring him on head first to avenge his father. I also tried leading stepping with attention, grace, and almost cat-like pride, which I found telegraphed his status as a trusted confidant to and protector of the royal family while differentiating him from Edward. And I would have gravitated more towards this choice throughout the process. I found in use of artificial vocal qualities and lower pitches also helped with making passive. Edward's raspy tenor, which was only slightly lower than my natural speaking voice, instantly alerted spectators to not only his pale sun persona and the words of Dr. Kerwin, but his potential as comedic relief, foolhardy disregard for political advice, and self-seeking rations. Clifford's chillingly somber space tones betrayed the calculated cutthroat villains Miss Jones touched on in her presentation. Such differentiation was invaluable to audience that I was trying to keep characters straight. Guidance sort of any female actor looking to portray different masculine characters on stage would do well to include contrasting both while using art. For our home affair, provided an opportunity for perhaps the most unorthodox gender I have ever played. Some combination of woman and puppet that was over. When I began this thesis, it was under the assumption that all the characters I played this year would fall somewhere on each other's spectrum, whether they were feminine, masculine, non-binary, bigender, trans, etc. But I never expected to tackle a character who partially lacked gender altogether. As publicly advertised I use myself on my I said about finding new inspirational photos and challenge myself to create a thoughtful start that wasn't a mere copy of another actor's performances, but my own unique creation. And I felt far more personally fulfilled by this work. I would really hope to use my starting for something like it again professionally someday, maybe in the context of a restoration comedy or more. My inspiration for trauma work, on the other hand, was so obscure and subtly presented, I'm sure it was for most people's minds. A character's gender is fundamental to the way they physically manifest and present themselves in space, and just because women are frequently Catholic, it's not a necessity, doesn't mean you can't have some interpretive fun with the situation. The fact that so many young women get unfeminine characters in classic work today is a theatrical cultural phenomenon so rich with shades of gender nuance that it's simply begging for novel artistic interpretations, intentional exploration, and specifically gender choices from female actors brave enough to make people their own.
Props. Yeah. Great, Anna.
I have so many questions, but I'll just start with one. So I remember in 81 minutes is something we didn't talk about in your thesis, but I remember a lot of what we did in 81 minutes. So I was wondering, how did female Dogberry in 81 minutes affect male Dogberry in much of the nothing? Was there anything that crossed over? Were there things that you subverted it, or try the opposite of that? Or was there any connection, or was it totally different for you?
So in the beginning of your presentation, as well as in the paper, you talk about the importance of making deliberate choices about gender representation and not falling into what you call gender blindness, vagueness, and neglect. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance of that intentionality and maybe what you see as the dangers or pitfalls of not being deliberate.
You know, honestly, maybe there's a lot of my personal case reflecting that those kind of statements.
Yeah.
Because, you know, all different like characteristics regarding how gender is presented. And I just like enjoy them on this rise of people. And not everyone does, but like some people like enjoy like getting this regarding that and like we shoot for that passion repercussion. So I think depending on if I can be going to matter for like whatever preference.
For you, when you're on stage, if you're tasked with playing a male character, it's important for you to know how you're embodying that maleness.
As a director, I'm like,
Yeah, I think that's just quickly, I think that's a good point that, you sort of brought up with your opening gambit, with your costume, that it's just so common for women to be tasked with playing men Well, it's just what we do, so we don't really have to talk about it, we think about it consciously. Yeah.
Kind of on that note, thinking about the work that you did in your MFA thesis about original practices, were there any discoveries that you made about original practices, specifically cross-dressing in the early modern period, that fed into the work that you did this year? Obviously, none of our shows, except maybe the Goblins, were set anything adjacent to Renaissance, but even then, the Goblins was its own little thing. But were there any practices or mindsets that you found helpful from the research that you did from the thesis?
That's something interesting that I've always interested in, with regards to like activities that you're talking about, and we did a lot of specialized things, we were working on it, and it's not really anything that we felt that was necessary or not, but we don't need to prepare things happen. But like, we would have these something very close to these outcomes that we might have actually gone together, things like that. Or we don't like ever think that's necessary or
Right. Like with the Dunbar warehouse, that they have special movement coaches to be there. All these.
necessary or really because we have to.
Well, great job, Rosemary. Corey, take us home.
When I was choosing my topic, I couldn't bring myself to land on any particular performance technique. I kept coming back to the advice we were given that we should focus on what we wanted to get out of our time in this program. And when I was really present with my work and thought about what I really felt I needed most, I kept thinking about the fact that more than anything, I could tell that I was holding myself back in ways that went beyond a particular technique. Over the last summer, I acted in a paid production, and I found myself continuing to really struggle with choices, being confident, and fully enjoying the experience of performing. Up until that point, I had extensive exposure to a number of acting training approaches that felt deeply impactful, as though they produced an immense amount of growth in my strength and skill as a performer, including from incredibly transformative private coaching I did on the side. I felt proud of my training and believed in myself, knowing that I could do strong work. Yet I found that I still lacked so much confidence and faced so much anxiety about everything I was doing, even while I intended to be applying the training that had been so impactful for me. I recognize that to some extent, feelings of anxiety and self-doubt common to the experiences of many actors, regardless of their skill or experience. But I felt that I was struggling with significant limiting habits, walls I put up, and resistances that were causing me to minimize myself, undermining my engagement with the work, and holding me back from making the next steps forward. So I decided to target my reflective work at these underlying aspects of my mental approach as an actor. My goal being to feel I'm prepared to tackle a given role and be confident in my working process without the consistent self-consciousness or criticism that make me doubt how and what I'm doing all the way through a production to the point that it diminishes my ability to enjoy the experience. So the question I set as my topic was, in what ways do ongoing living beliefs influence my preparation and performance as an actor? And how can addressing these beliefs through exploring mindfulness, mental wellness, performance techniques contribute to my artistic growth? From my previous training, I had a bank of impactful techniques to draw on, particularly including a plethora of exercises aimed at releasing inhibited tension in the instrument, especially an exercise for progressive muscle relaxation to address problems of expression and concentration and make full use of your capacity, as well as further acting mindfulness or other techniques for promoting awareness and aliveness in the body and presence, fluidly aware of internal and external experiences while focusing on what matters in the moment. This kind of work had significant impacts on my view of and my confidence in my ability as an actor to be unrestrained in expression and aware of my connection to my emotions, my body, and the moment. Alongside these forms of performance training, I had also been introduced to certain other practices for addressing mental limitations, including experiences with professional coaching, a relationship targeted at professional and personal growth and fulfillment of potential. It was because of these experiences that I felt equipped to tackle such an honest and intensively reflective topic. But despite these experiences, I felt that it was more fundamental issues with my engagement with the work, preventing me from fully integrating what I had learned into a lastingly unrestrained and confident mindset. At the outset of this project, what I was noticing included distracting or limiting worries about looking dumb, being judged, being liked by directors and fellow performers, being bad at coming up with or articulating ideas, watching myself, walls and resistances, to the point that instead of showing up confidently in a room and focusing on applying all that I had learned and strengthening my work, I could consistently come across as nervous and unsure of myself, always checking for approval, checking if I look okay, hesitating to put myself and my ideas out there, fearing it will be received negatively. The worries presenting as beliefs like, if I don't get positive feedback, I must not be doing a good job. And I need everyone to like me and think I look good in order to be satisfied and in order to succeed. This need for positive feedback and approval can lead to habitually presenting as shy and anxious simply because I worry that I'll be more open to criticism if I allow myself to embrace a more confident demeanor. So I end up minimizing myself and my abilities while others embrace their strengths and weaknesses or more boldness, resulting in me appearing less skilled and capable than I am. Perfectionism also tied in the need to make sure everything is fully right, contributing to my hesitation to put myself out there or commit until I know I won't make a mistake or have the right and best decision, instead of being willing to try and fail, which can also lead to putting too much pressure on myself, overthinking, and trying, not being able to appreciate progress and successes. Together, this leads to a distracted performance, hesitant, prioritizing external validation over focus on technique or connection. So my project tracks my work over this year as an actor in our MFA company, detailing my experiences confronting these issues across our season. Throughout the work, I used the reflective cycles of pre-production to further observe and identify the self-critical or subconscious factors holding me back as an actor, and to explore the application of acting, mindfulness, mental wellness, and journaling techniques for challenging and alleviating these factors. To be frank, I think it was the basic act of purposely reflecting on these factors throughout the year that made the biggest difference. Following the sections of the cold cycle for my portfolio pieces, I started by detailing the experiences I had with given production, where I did or didn't feel limited, what or if I tried anything, what that did, what factors might have been involved. Then I would reflect on these observations and further interpret what habits or growth I might be seeing. Then I draw on ideas and suggested approaches from a variety of disciplines and finish by setting out goals for how I aim to approach the next production cycle. Naturally, I became more targeted with this over time. And I ended up drawing on ideas from Strasberg techniques, professors' teachings, mindfulness exercises, cognitive behavioral therapy work, coaching and mental fitness program called Positive Intelligence, and more. The first production cycle, for much ado, though, was largely diagnostic, further identifying and clarifying many of the observations I outlined earlier, and taking stock of my limitations. I noted ways in which my worries were distracting or resulting in anxious energy, and took note of what I was already doing to try and relieve tension, focus, and relax that was and wasn't working. I could maintain a brave face in stressful group situations, but trying things like body check-ins wasn't enough to magically snap me out of any hyper anxious mental state with worries about, say, my work or others' thoughts about me. At this stage, my thought process was really centered on finding ways to clear my mind and remain present and engaged in intentional work. So I set a number of initial goals for the next process about doing better with consistent journaling, application of calming, intentional ways in the mindfulness exercises, and purposefully considering focuses of attention for the actor like objectives, focal points, and so on. But the Honest Woman's Revenge process brought up a bit of its own surprise. The approach the show and our director took involved leaning into as much craziness and silliness or sexiness as possible. The early stages of the rehearsal process involved experimentation with every act, where we would be given different silly rules that we had to follow. Particular favorite, other than what you've mentioned, being saying, "Oh my," anytime you hear an innuendo. Celebrate when you hear a good thing, say "oh no" when you hear a bad thing. But we'd have like 5 of these at a time. It's just super oversimplified. It made it almost impossible to be caught up in certain hesitant worries, and it made it really easy to put all the focus on playfulness and committing to the next crazy bit. This energy persisted through much of the production process. And so, while I actually ended up feeling like I did a pretty bad job of maintaining the goals I set for myself previously, the nature of this process seemed to help address a lot of the problems I had identified anyway. I still tracked a number of things making me feel really held back, though, including some hesitation with certain character work, but also continuing to feel somewhat distracted from a focus on a specific approach. I'm feeling caught up in the anxious craziness of what we were doing, and definitely continuing to note a lot of watching myself and worried about my appearance and other personal factors distracting me. Inspired by some more therapy-based experience, which was very helpful, and drawing on other acting and coaching schools of thought, I decided to try and create a more specific and targeted journaling system with a template of small prompts to respond, including about positives from my work, things I'm doing right, well, and choices I'm exploring, and also little sections for additional character questions or ideas. The goal being to reframe my thought process more towards positivity and problem solving. I also generally set out to encourage myself to thank and dismiss any negative self-talk and find ways to reframe thoughts in my reflection. Taking this into Bartholomew Fair seemed to work really well for me, helping to reframe my thought process and any negative self-talk, and helping to maintain and track experimentation with my characters at work. I don't think this all resulted in a stronger performance than the previous show, but that was okay. I still noticed myself holding back in certain ways, but it resulted in more comfort in my work and a stronger sense of control over my limiting habits. I felt like I was making progress on noticing and tackling them on my own. Whereas the previous cycle supported extreme commitment and play, this cycle I found ways to support self-comfort, focused work, attentiveness, and specificity in my own process. Going into the Goblins as the final production cycle, I resolved to focus my attention in journaling on remaining places I still noticed myself holding back, including picking a remaining limitation for each day, like my portrayal of confidence in the room, or commitment to choices, or distractions about my appearance, or whatnot, challenging them with a number of reframing questions. Additionally, I found that every discipline I was drawing on to aid my limitations in my work kept bringing up and singing the benefits of exercises like progressive muscle relaxation, tensing and releasing the muscle in the body, first wide benefits, mind and performance, reducing anxiety and stress, improving focus, concentration, more positive mood, bodily control, awareness of sensation. So I resolved to set aside time between rehearsals to make myself engage in that exercise every day to bolster my work and reframing and growth. The intense process of the Goblins was effective at highlighting for me where I was now at with my work. There were plenty of instances where I felt less worried and limitation, felt committed and had lots of fun. Dark Master. Yeah. There were also plenty of remaining places where I felt like I still held myself back less and say committed or engaged more freely or confidently. My journaling and approach to production helped me to challenge my thought process and remaining limitations in these ways. Though it felt a little less helpful at getting me to replace the thoughts or limitations with problem-solving actions. I ended the reflection with a set of ways I feel I can continue to draw on more purposeful acting technique, maybe some topical tasks or character sheets or space to flow, along with more playful exploration in order to continue to strengthen my work. Contemplating, for instance, how am I drawing what made me feel so strong about my free, committed, and fun performance work in Honest Woman's Revenge, combined with my more positively, productively, and confidently framed mindset that I was growing. Thus, at the end of the project in this year, I feel like I face many of the same difficulties that I did at the beginning. It was never my expectation that I would completely overcome every mental, behavioral, performance burden that I ever had. But I have seen how much fun I can have when I let my walls down and let myself be me and be silly. And I feel much more confident and comfortable with myself and my work. And like I've said have a set of practices that can allow me to accept my hang-ups as just the next places I can continue to grow as an actor, and to have the sense of clarity and control to productively consider and put to the test ways I can continue to improve my work. Thank you.
Very good. And then I just quickly want to commend your openness in your writing. It's really impressive. Jess, please, first question.
Speaking of your writing, if an actor in search for inspiration, pick up your pieces, start off as actors do. What might they get from your work?
Well, suppose there's two sides to that question. One being that my work is definitely incredibly personal to me. What I needed, what's going on with my own work itself, and my thinkingness. But at the same time, they could try for themselves as much as I tried, which I could continue to be more hardened on myself. But I tried things like the mindfulness exercises or the journaling prompts that I had, which more than anything came out of really struggling to make myself clarify my thoughts and get out of my head and actually force myself to use myself positives, especially about things I was insecure about myself. So getting myself to get in the habit, it was easy to have little small steps. So say good things about what you're doing now, and say some things that you're currently curious about.
Yeah, speaking of those exercises, you talk in the paper about cognitive reframing.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could just sort of describe what that is and maybe walk us through a little bit of how that would work.
Yeah, I approached everywhere I ran into a bunch of different versions of this, but like perhaps the most dramatic being like therapy work, cognitive behavioral therapy was different versions of finding the limiting beliefs you have or the imaging thoughts you have, and finding ways to question them with things like, I had a holistic questions of what evidence is actually here supporting what you're thinking about, what would be the worst thing that would happen if you're actually writing about this. Although I tried to avoid ones that were so negative and pick ones that were most positive. What are the benefits of this, or how do you think of this in more of a correct way? I liked what would a friend tell you. And it was a lot of the strategies, the reason mindfulness continued to play such a big part was a lot of things that I learned from, talked about the power of different body check-in mindfulness or practices like that, at getting yourself out of ruminating modes of thought and into better mood. It helps your body, but also allowing yourself to have more of the self-command over finding those positive things, and then give you those questions. How can you be more empowering your sage response in these responses to questions?
Yeah.
So, a couple of times you said something that's very common for any artist really, which is that I don't know if I'm doing what I wrote, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. And I think the next one in this presentation, like, good differs depending on who you're asking. In your opinion, how do you know if you've given a good performance? Because that means
Bad thing for me to be thinking about. In a different world, one of the other wonderful topics or techniques that people were drawing from in their thesis coursework might have been a great thing for me to work on, to have a thing to target my worries tangibly with action. I felt like I really needed to just address those concerns head on myself. But more specifically to your question, I think this isn't really an answer, but I've been really lucky this year to have a lot of things that I got to do that were extremely fun, and that I got a wonderfully meaningful amount of positive feedback from all of my friends on, and that was definitely impactful for sure. Which probably was, I think it's not what I was looking for, but mostly feeling good about what I like.
We'd love to follow up on that, but we're all out today. And congrats to all of today's and yesterday's presenters, and I'm going to hand it over to Pete who has a few closing remarks.
Well done, everyone. Okay, so first thing, we've heard from 21 presenters. We do have a 22nd person to congratulate who came up a couple of times in that last panel. We should acknowledge while we're all here that Sarah Topham successfully defended her MFA thesis. I think really important to kind of recognise the work she's doing alongside on both sides of the teaching equation, and we're delighted for Sarah. Okay, it's my job to present some closing remarks, and where my opening remarks were about Streetlight Shakespeare Ensemble, these ones are two Streetlight Shakespeare Ensemble. To paraphrase words that my doppelganger apparently said to a journey person, which Casey repeated earlier, I am so very proud. This marks the conclusion of your MFA year. It is the last day of finals. You may still have some tours and some workshops. You may still have a company book to put together, but you have now completed all formal assessment requirements. Streetlight Shakespeare Ensemble have had a record-breaking year in your tours, your activities, your outreach, as well as the artistically vibrant work we've been hearing about. Over the last 2 days, we've revisited your shows, your stage readings, your workshops, your committee work, your classes, your rehearsal room practice, your principles as a company. And we've also seen, as John so explicitly put it, your journeys towards being exactly the kinds of scholar practitioner that Ralph set up this program to nurture, and which it's your faculty's privilege to continue to train. I've been personally moved to watch you grow from the very first class I taught for this program to your development into the artists and scholars that form you. You represent the very best of what this program is about, and your grace and generosity and vulnerability in sharing your work and the process throughout this festival has epitomised that. Keep streetlighting. We have a reception to follow. Please stay and celebrate. If you have your title pages, please give them back to me, otherwise we will not let you graduate. That is it from me. I hope you've enjoyed this festival. Thank you all for being here. Well done. Please go celebrate. How dare you, so